they've been sitting on something. And I don't mean recently, I mean for a while. Long enough that the sitting has become its own kind of weight, the specific accumulating heaviness of someone carrying information that doesn't belong in the interior. That was never meant to be permanent. That was supposed to be temporary, held briefly, released when the timing was right, but then the timing kept not being right, and the temporary became extended, and the extended became something that started to feel like a permanent condition, but it isn't permanent. That's what I keep coming back to as I sit with this energy. The holding is almost over. And what gets released when the holding ends, what this person is carrying toward you right now, building toward saying, losing sleep over the logistics of how to say that's what this reading is about. I want to describe it carefully, not because I'm being coy, because the quality of it matters as much as the content of it, because how you receive something depends on understanding what it actually is. And what this is not what you'd expect. Let me start somewhere you might not expect me to start, with you. Specifically with something about you that made this secret necessary in the first place. Because secrets don't form around ordinary things. They form around things that have weight, that have consequence, that matter enough that the question of when and how to reveal them becomes its own extended project. And the reason this particular secret has you at its center, the reason this person has been carrying something specifically about you or specifically about their relationship to you, is that you matter to them in a way they haven't fully communicated. That's the root of all of this. Not drama, not calculation, not the kind of secret that comes from malice or agenda, the kind that comes from caring too much to get it wrong, from having something true and significant to communicate and being so aware of its significance, so aware of what it means, what it could change, what it could cost if it lands incorrectly, that the communication has been delayed and delayed and delayed by the very weight of what's trying to be said. There's something specific about what this person looks like right now in their ordinary days, in the texture of how they've been moving through their life while carrying this. They're distracted, but not in the scattered, can't function way, in the specific way of someone whose attention keeps getting claimed by one thing, regardless of what else is in front of them. Who can be in a conversation, a completely unrelated conversation, something entirely mundane, and suddenly find themselves somewhere else, somewhere that has your name on it, and they pull themselves back and return to the conversation, and a few minutes later drift back again, because the thing they're carrying doesn't stay neatly in its assigned compartment. It has a way of surfacing, of making itself present in the middle of moments that weren't designed to hold it. This has been happening with increasing frequency, which is actually the thing I want you to understand about why this is happening now rather than earlier. Not because they suddenly found the courage they previously lacked, because the frequency of the surfacing has reached a point where managing it has become more effort than saying it. The secret is tired of being a secret, and so are they. Hold on, because I want to try to describe the nature of what this secret actually is. And I want to do this carefully, not with false precision, not by claiming to know the specific details that belong to your specific life, but with enough accuracy that you'll recognize it when it arrives. It's layered. That's the first thing. It's not one single thing cleanly packaged. It has dimensions to it, an outer layer and an inner layer, and possibly something underneath both of those that even the person carrying it hasn't fully excavated yet. The outer layer is something factual, information, something they know that you don't. Something about a situation, a circumstance, a development in the landscape of your shared world, however that world is configured that they've been in possession of and you haven't, that factual layer is significant on its own, changes something on its own. But it's not actually the most important part. The inner layer, this is where I keep being pulled. This is the part that keeps surfacing when I sit with this energy and I don't want to skip past it in favor of the more dramatic outer layer. The inner layer is personal. Something about how they feel, about what exists in them when it comes to you, about what has been developing quietly, without permission, without them necessarily wanting it to develop in the space that you occupy in their interior life. And I want to describe that development carefully because it wasn't planned. This person didn't set out to feel whatever they feel, didn't engineer a situation in which feelings became relevant, didn't choose this any more than you choose the weather. It happened gradually in the specific inconvenient way that real things happen without asking whether the timing is convenient or whether the circumstances are appropriate or whether this is something either person is prepared for. It just arrived and then it stayed and grew and became something they couldn't file under passing or manageable or something that would resolve on its own with sufficient time. It hasn't resolved. It's grown into something significant enough that carrying it without saying it has started to feel dishonest in a way this person cannot continue to be comfortable with. There's an image, someone holding something in both hands, something that started small, small enough to carry easily, small enough that the carrying felt temporary and manageable, but things held in both hands have a tendency to grow. Not because anything external is added to them, because the act of holding something, of giving it your sustained attention, of keeping it present, of returning to it again and again in the private moments, that act itself tends to increase the thing's weight. What started as manageable has become substantial, and their hands are getting tired, not in a way they can complain about, not in a way they can explain to anyone. In the private, undisclosable way of someone who has been holding something alone for too long and is beginning to feel it in every part of themselves that has been compensating for the weight. Something has to be put down. The only way to put it down is to give it to you. The more I sit with this, the more I keep finding something that surprised me. This person has been protecting you. Part of why the secret has been held so long, part of the specific logic of the timing, the calculation of when would be right, has been about you, about what you were going through, about whether the moment was one where receiving this would be something you could hold alongside everything else you were already carrying. They've been watching, not intrusively, in the specific way of someone who cares about your well-being enough to time their truth-telling around your capacity to receive it, who looked at certain periods of your life and thought, not now. She's in the middle of something. Not now. She needs this moment to be about what she's navigating, not about what I have to say. And there's something, I want to name this carefully, there's something both tender and slightly frustrating about that. Tender because it came from genuine care, from someone paying enough attention to your life to consider what you needed before considering what they needed to release. And slightly frustrating because you've been navigating your life without information that was being held for you by someone who decided unilaterally that you couldn't handle it. That's worth noting. That's worth being honest about. The care was real and the withholding was also real, and both of those things can be true simultaneously. Wait, there's something I want to go deeper on here because I keep circling it and I think it's important. The shock element. The title promises shock, and I want to try to describe what kind of shock this actually is. Because shock comes in different forms and they feel different in the body. And I want you to know which one is coming. It's not the shock of something terrible. I want to say that clearly first, because I think when people hear the word shocked in connection with a secret, they immediately reach for the worst version, the catastrophic interpretation, this is going to be devastating reading. That's not what I'm picking up. What I'm picking up is the shock of something unexpected in the specific way of something you didn't allow yourself to see. Something that was available to be seen, that had clues, that left traces, that showed its edges in various moments, but that you classified as something else each time it surfaced. Filed it under friendship or imagination or coincidence. The shock is going to be the specific experience of realizing you already had pieces of this, that your intuition had been pointing here and you've been redirecting it. Not because you're unperceptive, you're extraordinarily perceptive, because this particular thing touched something you decided to not hope for. And not hoping is its own kind of blindness, its own way of missing what's in plain sight. I want to describe something about the moment itself when it happens, when they finally say it. There's going to be a preamble, an attempt to create context before the content. The specific verbal behavior of someone trying to prepare you for something without being able to prepare you for it, because preparation would require revealing the thing the preparation is supposed to precede. So it's going to feel slightly strange, slightly off rhythm, like someone who keeps starting a sentence and then backing up and starting from a slightly different point, who can't quite find the approach that feels right, because no approach feels right for something this size. And you're going to feel something shift in the conversation, a quality change, the specific moment where what seemed like an ordinary interaction reveals that it was never ordinary, that it was always headed here, that every moment that preceded this one was the runway for this landing. And then they'll find it, the words, not the perfect words, there are no perfect words for something this real, the actual words, the ones that are true rather than polished, the ones that cost them something to say. And those words are going to land somewhere specific in you. I've been trying to identify exactly where, and what I keep getting is somewhere you forgot was still open. There's something about your own interior preparation for this that I want to name, because you're going to receive this while also being surprised by it. And those two things, receiving and being surprised, create a specific challenge, because receiving well requires some degree of groundedness, of being able to stay present in a moment rather than retreating into processing, of being able to let something land before beginning to analyze it. And surprise, by definition, destabilizes the groundedness. So you're going to be simultaneously called to be present and caught off guard. And I want to say something about how to navigate that. Let the surprise happen first. Don't reach for the composure immediately. Don't smooth your face into neutrality before you've felt what you're actually feeling. Let whatever lands on your face land there. Let whatever moves through your body move through it. The composure can come after. The analysis can come after. The careful, measured, thoroughly Virgo assessment of what this means and what you want to do with it, all of that can come after. In the first moment, just feel it, whatever it is, fully. I want to say something about the people around you who don't know this secret is coming, because there are people in your orbit who have their own version of the story. their own understanding of your relationship with this person, their own narrative about what exists between you and what doesn't. And when this becomes known, when the secret becomes something that was said and received and is now part of the visible architecture of your life, some of those people are going to have to revise their narrative. Some of them are going to be surprised. Some of them are going to be unsurprised in a way that's slightly irritating. The ones who will say privately or out loud that they always knew, that it was obvious that they saw this coming long before either of you did. Let them have that. What matters isn't who saw it first. What matters is what it is. And what it is real. Whatever form it takes, however it arrives, whatever the specific content of the outer and inner layers of this thing when they're finally fully revealed, it's real. And real things, when they arrive in your life, deserve your full presence, not your management, not your performance of having handled it. Your actual presence. The more I sit with this, the more I keep finding something about timing, about why this week, this window, this specific concentrated period, rather than any of the many other moments that came before it. Something released on their side, some internal thing released, a decision finalized, a threshold crossed, the specific moment where the calculation of risk versus cost finally definitively tipped, where the cost of continued silence became something they experienced not as manageable but as intolerable. And intolerable is a different thing than difficult. Difficult you can sustain. Virgo knows better than anyone that difficult is sustainable with the right orientation. Intolerable is a wall. You reach it and the path behind you closes. They reached it recently and the path behind them has closed. I want to talk about what comes after the shock, because shock is a moment, a specific, contained, this is happening right now experience that has a beginning and a duration and an end. And what comes after the shock is where you actually live, where the decisions get made, where the real navigation of this begins. After the shock, there's going to be a question, not one they ask you, one the situation asks you. What do you want? Not what's reasonable, not what's expected, not what the history of this dynamic would predict or what the people around you would advise. Not even what you think you should want given the complexity of everything this involves. What do you actually want? And I want to say something about that question that I think is important. You're allowed to take time with it. This doesn't require an immediate answer. It doesn't require you to know in the moment what you feel and what you want and what you're going to do. It doesn't require you to have processed something genuinely surprising in the space of a conversation. You're allowed to say, I need to sit with this. Not as a deflection, as an honest communication of where you actually are, of what you actually need in order to respond from your center rather than from the shock. Take that time, use it well, and trust that whatever you find when you sit with it is going to be something you can stand behind. Because your knowing, your specific, precise, extraordinarily accurate Virgo knowing has never led you wrong when you've given it the space it needs to operate. This deserves that space. The last thing, there's a version of your life on the other side of this conversation that looks different from the version you're currently living. Not unrecognizably different, not transformed in some dramatic, everything changes at once way, but different in the specific, meaningful, this matters way of something that shifts when hidden things become visible, when truths that were operating underground surface into the light, and can finally be addressed directly rather than felt around the edges of. That version of your life has more honesty in it, more of the specific, grounded, I know where I stand honesty that Virgo requires to function at their best, that you require to feel fully alive in your own existence. Because you've been feeling around the edges of something for a while, sensing the presence of something without being able to see it clearly. And clarity, even when it arrives as shock, even when it reconfigures something, even when it requires you to revise your understanding of a significant portion of your recent experience, clarity is always better than the alternative, always better than the specific low-grade exhaustion of someone navigating in partial darkness. The lights are about to come on. And what you're going to see is going to shock you. And then it's going to make a very specific kind of sense. The kind that makes you realize your intuition was pointing here the whole time, and that the only thing that was ever obscuring it was the particular darkness of someone else's kept secret. It's almost over. If something in this touched something true, if a moment landed somewhere you weren't expecting, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what resonated. Even just a few words, it means more than you know.